The Navy SEAL classroom buzzed with low whispers, the kind that carried smirks and hidden laughter. At the front stood a woman no one expected. Petite glasses perched on her nose, pressed khakis instead of camo. She looked more like a university lecturer than someone who could teach America's toughest warriors. "Cute professor," one recruit muttered. Another added, "Wrong hall, Mom." Even their class leader, 6'4" Merrick Davenport, folded his arms and sneered. "We're here to fight, not sit through psychology lectures." They had no idea. Within weeks, those same men would be stunned into silence. They'd see the scars on her arms. They'd watch her dismantle their best in seconds, and they would stand at attention when the commander revealed the truth. This professor wasn't just an academic. She was a warfighter with a call sign whispered across battlefields. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Coronado's Naval Special Warfare Training Command smelled of sweat and salt water. Recruits limped into the classroom after another brutal obstacle course only to stop short. At the front stood Dr. Elaine Thorne, petite with auburn hair tied in a bun, arranging papers on the desk. No uniform, no gear, just wire-rimmed glasses and calm composure. Confused glances passed through the room. Then Training Officer River announced the new edition, 4 hours a week of asymmetric warfare theory. The silence cracked into muffled chuckles. To men forged in mud and fire, theory sounded like weakness. Davenport, already the leader, already the strongest, spoke for them. "With respect, Mom, the enemy doesn't care about your theories when bullets are flying." Doctor flying. Thorne's gaze lingered, calm. "Sharp trainee Davenport, show me your room clearing procedure." He moved with practiced precision. "Perfect textbook execution." She nodded. "Textbook indeed. Now, let me show you the 7 fatal flaws in your approach." For 10 minutes, she tore apart his performance with surgical precision, pointing out angles, blind spots, and vulnerabilities no manual ever mentioned. The recruit's smirks faded. Davenport clenched his jaw. Then, her sleeve slipped, exposing a jagged scar around her wrist. She quickly adjusted, but one recruit, Calloway, noticed. Theories weren't the only thing she carried. Day after day, Thorne drilled them not in push-ups or sprints, but in failures of perception. She spoke of anchoring bias, availability heuristics, and the fatal mistakes caused when operators relied only on strength. Davenport grew restless. "We need to be stronger, faster, more aggressive. That's what keeps us alive." Her answer was a dagger wrapped in calm words. "The strongest operator I ever knew died because he couldn't adapt." The word "new" silenced the room. She spoke as if she had been there. Some recruits leaned in. Others rolled their eyes. Davenport simmered. The tipping point came when she introduced sensory manipulation exercises, specialized devices that disoriented even the best. Lights, sounds, illusions. Within minutes, SEAL candidates who prided themselves on strength stumbled like rookies. "This isn't training," Davenport muttered loud enough for all to hear. Thorne's eyes hardened. Remedy, 2012, 3 operators killed. Insurgents used these very tactics. Physical strength couldn't save them. Training like this would have. The room went silent again. By the 3rd week, resentment thickened. Someone drew a cruel caricature of her on the whiteboard, a frail professor being carried off by real soldiers. Thorne erased it without flinching. But Calloway, watchful, thoughtful, approached her before class. "Mom, I wanted to apologize. Not everyone thinks this is a joke. Some of us see value. But Davenport runs the room." She gave a faint smile until he doesn't. That day, she divided the class into teams for sensory manipulation drills. The results were humiliating. Even Davenport's team stumbled back in defeat. She gathered them. "This was designed to fail. Your bodies are strong, but your mind's untrained. That changes now." Davenport snapped. "This is a waste of time." Thorne's eyes narrowed, steel behind the glasses. "In Kandahar, I watched a man die because he thought exactly like you. His muscles couldn't save him. His mind could have." The room froze. She had said, watched. And Davenport's certainty began to crack. 3 weeks into the program, the classroom felt like a battlefield. Not mud and bullets, but tension and pride. Dr. Elaine Thorne stood before the whiteboard, dissecting Davenport's team's latest tactical simulation. Her calm voice cut sharper than any blade. Your approach was technically correct, but fatally flawed. This entry pattern creates a funnel. In Fallujah, that same maneuver cost 4 operators their lives. Davenport's patience cracked. With all due respect, Mom, this isn't something you learn from books. These tactics were tested in combat by real operators. Her marker clicked against the board. The Alisgary district's upper floors create crossfire zone. 7 seconds after breaching, your team would be dead. I know because I've seen it. Her words dropped like a hammer. Specific? Too specific? The recruits shifted uncomfortably. Calloway's sharp eyes noticed something. The way she touched her side when speaking about chest wounds, a gesture too personal for theory. Then she described the sensory distortions of a first combat kill time. Slowing sounds, warping, color sharpening. Her voice was calm, clinical, but carried a weight no textbook could fake. How would you know what it feels like to take a life? Davenport snapped, standing abruptly. The classroom froze. Thorne didn't flinch. Page 94 in your reading covers neurological combat stress. Let's continue. Her refusal to rise to the bait only fueled his anger. As class ended, recruits filed out in silence, but Davenport stayed. His 6'4" frame towered over her desk. His voice dropped low, sharp as a knife. I think it's time we stop pretending. You're teaching warfare to men who will actually fight while you've never seen combat. That makes you a liability. Thorne stacked her papers calmly. Your concern is noted. No, he growled, stepping closer. You don't get it. These men trust me. They'll follow me into combat, not you. Your theories undermine everything we've built. Her eyes finally lifted, steady as stone. Leadership isn't about being the strongest in the room. It's about knowing when strength isn't the answer. Something inside Davenport snapped. In one motion, he seized her throat and slammed her against the wall. Gasps echoed around the room. Several recruits had lingered at the door, now frozen in shock. This is combat, Professor, Davenport snarled. This is what we're training for. Threats, violence. Not your theories. For one heartbeat, she didn't resist, her eyes locked onto his cold, calculating. Then everything changed in a blur too fast to track. The woman they thought was a professor vanished. Her hands moved like lightning, breaking his grip, twisting his arm, driving him to the ground. A sickening pop echoed as his shoulder dislocated. In seconds, their strongest man was face first on the floor, immobilized under her knee. The room went silent, except for Davenport's ragged breathing. The door opened. Commander Blackwood entered. His expression was unreadable, almost unsurprised. At ease, Major. The words cut like thunder. Major. Whispers rippled through the recruits. Thorne released Davenport and rose with calm precision, straightening her shirt. The scholar was gone. The warrior remained. Commander Blackwood's voice carried iron. Gentlemen, allow me to properly introduce your instructor. This is Major Elaine Thorne, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Call sign Wraith, 15 years of operational experience. Silver Star, Purple Heart, pioneer of cognitive warfare tactics that rewrote our doctrine and the sole survivor of Operation Obsidian Shield. The silence deepened into awe. Every man in that room had heard whispers of Obsidian Shield, the classified mission where an entire SEAL team was lost. That one survivor became legend, though no one had ever known her face. And now she stood before them. Davenport sat stunned, arm hanging uselessly. His pride was broken, his certainty crushed. The commander's gaze swept the room. You mocked the very tactics that saved lives across battlefields. You dismissed the lessons forged in blood. Major Thorne's scars were earned where most of you will never survive. She's here because strength alone isn't enough anymore. Learn that now or you won't last. The recruits lowered their eyes, shame spreading across their faces. Davenport, once the loudest voice, looked hollow. Major Thorne adjusted her sleeve, her calm demeanor restored. Class dismissed. The men filed out, silent and shaken. But Calloway lingered, glancing back at her with new eyes. The scars, the stories, the certainty. Suddenly, it all made sense. Wraith wasn't a teacher from the outside. She was one of them. The next morning, the classroom was empty except for Commander Blackwood. "Training's suspended for 24 hours, he said flatly. "The men need time to process and Davenport is under review. His career may be over." Thorne sat down her papers. He acted on assumptions, wrong, dangerous ones, but genuine. Sometimes pain is the only teacher. "You could have neutralized him without injury," Blackwood said carefully. "Yes, but he needed to feel the cost of his arrogance." Later that evening, she found Davenport in a medical bay, shoulders strapped in a sling. He didn't look up. "They're separating me," he muttered. "Assaulting an instructor. I'm finished." She studied him. "Is that what you want?" He looked up, stunned. "What I want doesn't matter. I crossed the line." "It matters to me," she said quietly. "Because I haven't signed off on your paperwork yet." Confusion flickered across his face. "Why wouldn't you?" "I attacked you." "You did?" she acknowledged. "Because you thought I was a civilian academic teaching theories that could get your men killed. Misguided but rooted in loyalty. That instinct I respect. It's the foundation of leadership. The problem wasn't your protection. It was your assumptions." His voice broke. "So what happens now?" "That depends on you. You can leave with your pride intact and your ignorance unchallenged. Or you can stay and learn what true strength requires, mental as well as physical." Davenport stared at the floor, then back at her. "I was wrong about you. About combat. I want to learn." She nodded once. "Training resumes at 0800. Don't be late." The next morning, the classroom atmosphere had transformed. Every recruit stood at attention, respect burning where scorn once lived. Even Davenport, arms still in a sling, stood tall. "Seats," she said simply. Questions flooded the room. "Is it true you were the only survivor of Obsidian Shield?" "Yes, my team was ambushed. 7 operators lost. I sustained multiple injuries but extracted with critical intelligence." "Your scars wrist side. Kandahar. Captured. Tortured. Nerve damage permanent." The room went silent. Finally, Davenport raised his hand. Voice softer now. "Major. You said the strongest operator you knew died because he couldn't adapt. Who was he?" She met his eyes. "Your father, Chief Garrett Davenport. He saved my life twice before losing his own. Stronger than 10 of me, but he relied on muscle alone. When injury took that, he couldn't adapt. That cost him everything." The air went still. Davenport's face drained of color. "My father," he whispered. "Yes, and that's why I'm here, because physical strength isn't enough. Adaptation is survival." The recruits leaned forward, pen scribbling furiously. The room once poisoned with doubt, now burned with reverence. The professor was gone. The warrior had been revealed, and the men would never see her the same again. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the recruits had ever experienced. What began as skepticism turned into discipline, then into reverence. Where they once mocked, they now leaned forward in silence, scribbling notes as Major Elaine Thorne spoke. Her words weren't abstract lectures anymore. Every scar she revealed, every tactical failure she dissected, every moment of calm conviction carried the weight of survival. They began to see her not as a lecturer, but as a warrior who had paid in blood for every lesson she passed on. Davenport, his shoulder bound in a sling, became the most transformed. The man who once dismissed her now listened with intensity, his jaw tight as he absorbed each principle. No longer the loudest voice of resistance, he was the first to admit when he didn't understand, the first to volunteer to run drills despite his injury, and the first to nod in agreement when she emphasized adaptability over strength. For the others, this change was even more powerful than her reveal. If the strongest among them could bow his pride and learn from her, then so could they. Practical exercises soon replaced lectures, blindfolded drills across obstacle courses. Simulated injuries during tactical maneuvers, missions with time limits, and unexpected curveballs, lost weapons, dead radios, equipment malfunctions. Every time Thorn threw chaos into their path. Every time she reminded them, physical advantage means nothing if your mind collapses under uncertainty. She trained them to fight in the dark, to fight while disoriented, to fight when strength was drained from their bodies. Slowly, they stopped relying on muscle memory and started thinking like predators who adapted faster than the prey. One night, Blackwood observed silently from the back as Thorn called out across the obstacle course. "You've lost your primary weapon and you've taken a hit to your dominant arm. Hostiles approaching your 3 o'clock. 2 civilians in your care. What's your move?" Recruits stumbled through answers, some faltering, some improvising. Then she turned to Davenport. His response came without hesitation: misdirection, terrain exploitation, psychological pressure, not brute force, but cunning. She nodded, faint approval in her eyes. "Excellent. You've learned to weaponize perception itself." Blackwood's face softened. He knew what he was seeing. Transformation. 1 month after the confrontation, Davenport was no longer the symbol of defiance. He was the proof of her method. Late at night, Thorn found him in the training bay, sweating through drills modified to account for his injured shoulder. He had built systems around his limitations instead of waiting for healing. "Working late, trainee?" she asked, stepping into the dim light. "Yes, Mom. Adaptation isn't optional." "Not anymore." She watched quietly as he moved, efficient and calm. No wasted energy. He reminded her of his father, but sharper, wiser, willing to learn. Finally, the day of their evaluation arrived. The recruits faced a 6-hour gauntlet designed to break both body and mind. Complex tactical problems stacked on physical exhaustion. Sudden shifts of leadership, equipment failing when they needed it most. Every variable that could crush an operator's composure was thrown at them. But this time they didn't stumble blindly. They adapted. They rotated leadership when one failed. They improvised weapons when stripped of gear. They turned their environment into an ally instead of an obstacle. Davenport's team in particular stood out. When his shoulder slowed him during a climb, he yielded command to Calloway without hesitation. When sensory manipulation left Calloway reeling, Fallon took over, holding the unit together. The class that once jeered at the idea of theory now moved as a living organism, mind sharper than their muscles. At the end, as they stood drenched in sweat and caked in dirt, Thorn addressed them. "Today, you prove that strength without thought is wasted. You adapted under pressure, led when called, followed when needed. This knowledge will not only make you more effective, it will keep you alive. Remember this lesson when the enemy thinks he can break you. Remember it when your body fails, but your mind remains, because that is what will bring you home." Commander Blackwood stepped forward and declared the program a permanent addition to SEAL training. They were the first class to complete it. The standard for every class that followed. Graduation came 6 months later. Thorn stood in the crowd, silent as always, watching each recruit receive the trident that marked them as operators. Families cheered, friends shouted, but she remained in the shadows, content to see them succeed. When Davenport stepped forward, Blackwood's voice carried. "This man has demonstrated tactical innovation, humility, and leadership forged in adversity. He ranked highest in Major Thorn's program and set a new benchmark for what it means to adapt." Davenport's chest swelled with pride, but his eyes sought her in the crowd. When he found her, he gave a subtle nod of respect, acknowledgement of a bond forged not in pride, but in pain and transformation. As the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Thorn tried to slip away quietly, but the recruits had other plans. One by one, the newly minted operators lined up along her path. As she walked past, each rendered a crisp salute. No orders given, no speeches made, just silent, unshakable respect. Davenport stood at the end of the line, his salute sharp, his voice steady. "Thank you, Major, for teaching us that true strength isn't domination, it's adaptation." She returned the salute with formal precision. "Remember that lesson when everything else fails, it will bring you home when nothing else can." Later, as she left the base with a single box of belongings, Blackwood stopped her with final words. The program exceeded every expectation. Lower injury rates, higher mission success projections. You've changed not just their training, but their futures. She gave a small nod. Teaching them may be the most important mission of my life. She drove away under the setting sun, scars hidden beneath her sleeves, carrying the weight of the past, but also the satisfaction of knowing she had forged a generation who would survive what her team could not. And as those young operators celebrated, one truth bound them all. They had entered the program believing strength was in muscle alone. They left knowing the mind was the real weapon. If this story moved you, honor the unseen warriors who carry scars the world will never notice. Drop a salute in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories for more untold stories of valor, sacrifice, and resilience.